Right now, we're going to move on with a look at what's making headlines in today's French newspapers. Haxi Belkin has been eagerly thumbing through them for us. Hello there, Haxi.
Hi.
And today we are celebrating France's National Day, 14 Juillet, Bastille Day, as it's also known. So happy Bastille Day to you.
Happy Bastille Day to you too.
Is it going to be a happy Bastille Day, though, for President Hollande?
I don't think it will be, you know. According to Aujourd'hui en France, it's unlikely to be a day of celebration for French President François Hollande. We see the Arc de Triomphe there, planes painting the French sky and the tricolour flag, and three very stern-looking men. In the middle, Hollande, of course. On the right, we have Prime Minister Manuel Valls, and on the left, Economy Minister Emmanuel Macron, all under the headline 14 Juillet, en ordre dispersé. The 14th of July, marching out of step. This is a reference to what the paper calls the raging battle that's currently being played out by the three men. At the heart of the matter, Macron's nasty habit of speaking out against the government.
Well, the paper does go on to explore that in a bit more depth, doesn't it? It's a bit of a nasty row going on, really, at the very top of the government.
Well, of course, just a couple of days ago, Macron, who doesn't actually belong to any particular political party, organised a meeting of a new political movement that he set up. It's being seen by many as a possible launchpad for a presidential bid next year. But as this article points out, that's not the only thing troubling Hollande. There's, of course, the French team's crushing defeat at the hands of Portugal on Sunday, and of course the rather embarrassing revelations lapped up not just in France but across the world that the president's personal hairdresser earns almost €10,000 a month to keep Hollande at his coiffed best.
Well, I have to say, I'm not sure how much Hollande is responsible for the French football team, but he certainly is responsible for how much he pays his hairdresser, out of public money, we ought to say as well. Interesting little cartoon accompanying that.
So we see here an incandescent Manuel Valls addressing a rather hapless-looking François Hollande. He's really dropped us in it. He should shut his mouth and be a little bit more discreet, screams the Prime Minister, to which Hollande replies, "Who? My hairdresser or Macron?"
Interesting indeed. All right, this story also making into the left-wing Libération paper as well.
I like this headline a lot. Le bal des pompiers pyromanes translates roughly as the pyromaniac fireman's ball. Now, the night before the 14th of July in France, it's traditional for fire stations to fling open their doors and host parties for the general public. But for Libération, the firemen in question are Hollande, Macron and Valls, and they're doing very little to put out the fires of political dissent. All this with just 10 months to go before the next general election. The paper's editorial goes on. The headline, Macron leave or remain. The paper's amazed that despite Macron's political meeting on Tuesday, at which he rallied against what he sees as the paralysis, the inequality and the sluggishness of a deeply troubled France, he hasn't actually yet been booted out of government. The paper asks how Macron can continue to serve alongside a president who's made unity and cohesion the cornerstones of his time in office. Essentially, it asks how Hollande can tolerate a minister who so openly defies him, and the paper predicts that this is one of the main issues that will dominate his annual 14th of July meeting with the press later today.
Indeed, a lot of people do traditionally tune into that, perhaps a few more this year. The right wing, what do they have to say about this whole thing?
Well, as you can imagine, it's not so different. According to this piece in Le Parisien, right-wing politicians in particular are also having a field day. The journalist here quotes leader of the centre-right Républicain party and, of course, the former president, Nicolas Sarkozy. Hollande is, according to Sarkozy, giving off the impression of a total loss of authority. Now,
he would say that, though, wouldn't he?
Wouldn't he just? And of course, it hasn't yet announced it, but there's a lot of talk about Sarkozy maybe throwing his hat into the ring to lead the Républicains into the next general elections. That hasn't been confirmed, but this sort of rhetoric hints that that may well be the shape of things to come.
Yeah, leading himself back to the presidency, more to the point. Today, of course, traditionally a day when we all get to look at the armed forces. The press takes a look at the state of the nation and the state of the military. It's a very proud military tradition here in France, isn't it?
It is, but this piece takes a slightly different view. It's in the centre-right daily Le Figaro, and it's headlined, "The Army Overwhelmed by Exhaustion and Fear." This article quotes an army chief who laments the 200-odd days per year that army personnel have to spend away from their families, and also the fact that the number of training days that army personnel go through has dropped from 85 to 65 in recent years. So soldiers often feel underprepared for the myriad missions they're asked to undertake. And of course, that's all compounded by the fact that we're under a state of emergency and, of course, the specific targeting of army personnel.
All right, let's move on outside of France to a slightly more uplifting story. This one's from the Netherlands.
We are, of course, in full Tour de France swing, and there's a lovely piece in Libération about an amateur cycling team in Holland called Marco Polo, which offers refugees a path into professional cycling.
Wow.
That is, of course, if they prove they're up to the task. A refugee's application for asylum needs to first be accepted by Holland, but once they have their papers and they've been enrolled in intensive language lessons, those who want to can try out for the amateur team. And several top clubs have already expressed an interest in recruiting from them. Although the article is keen to point out that the project's less about propelling people to Tour de France stardom than providing refugees with a purpose and really a stake in Dutch society.
Yeah, I'd say, well, it's known for cycling, isn't it, Holland? So
Nice
getting
and
on your
flat.
bike is probably a lovely way to get involved in Dutch society. Thanks very much, Haxi Myers-Belkin. We'll be back a bit later on looking through the international papers for us as well. Right now, we're going to take a short break. Then I'll be back with more on our top international news headlines for you. Don't go away.